Hi everyone, Alon Litz, the CEO of October Health. I'm here today joined by Heidi Kornmuller from Coronation. Really excited to have her here with us. We're going to be covering a lot of topics, but a particular focus on females in the workplace and how we can set them up for success in a way that they really thrive. So with that, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, excited for our discussion. And I think before we get into the crux of the discussion, do you mind giving our listeners, our viewers, a bit of insight into your background, your experience, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Yes. I started off with a business science degree at UCT. At that stage, I wanted to be a psychologist, and the degree I did would have set me up to be a psychologist within corporate.
Okay.
Before I got to masters.
Which you basically are.
Funny enough, yes, without the masters. As I say, I think I took a break and thought I'd go back and do masters, and then got into recruitment and into HR.
Okay.
Started off at Investec as the first HR consultant in Cape Town, and then moved to Coronation. And I've been there ever since, and I've worked in that space really, I guess, looking after the people for our organization, whether that's to do with hiring, whether it's development, coaching, making sure we're transforming. We don't make widgets in our business. Our people, talent is the most important aspect. So we always want to make sure that we're getting the best talent and retaining the best talent and growing it while it's with us. So that's really what I'm responsible for. Since UCT, I have done a coaching diploma, which helps me with that. I also did an honors in financial analysis and portfolio management, which was a little bit of overkill for the role that I'm in, but it helps me understand what the investment guys are doing. And I've also done shorter courses just to help me in terms of facilitation, labor law, etc.
Okay, so I think definitely a theme there of continuous learning, which I think what we see is a critical skill for individuals generally within the workplace to continuously invest in your own skills, your own development, your own growth. Is that something which you offer for employees? I know Coronation is generally seen as a top brand in South Africa, a top employer. So what are some of those secrets behind making Coronation a place that people, aspire to be part of?
So I think, yes, on the development piece, I think what we are also very conscious of is hiring people that match our culture and our values, so that people like to feel like they're part of a winning team. So we want people who enjoy being surrounded by smart people, that challenge them, that are always curious, very entrepreneurial in nature. So we have a very informal structure, flat structure, which means that decisions can be made quickly and easily. We are a huge fan of people doing continuous learning. We support that and encourage people to do either academic qualifications or shorter courses or coaching, CFA, for example, if you're in investments. So we are always offering that and wanting to train people and grow them for the roles that they're in, but also potentially the future roles that they could play for us as well. So to me, the hiring part is incredibly important. I love recruitment, and we take a lot of time with recruitment to make sure that we get that fit just right. So we do technical testing, we do psychometric testing, we do a number of interviews, so that by the time we've made that decision, I think everybody's bought in from both sides, the candidate as well as the business. And I think that step is crucial, because hiring the wrong person can have a huge impact on all the people around them. So we do take that very seriously. And then once they're in the system, we want to do our best to retain them and grow them and make sure that we create an environment that is conducive to that, which is always the challenge. I think all of us are trying to make sure that we have a place that people want to be and that they enjoy their time at work.
I guess you're a testament to getting that right. You're there for a reason, right? And you joined and you've stuck around, which is unusual, right? But clearly there's something about the environment that you love. And I'm sure that also attracts candidates into the system.
Yes, I think for me, I mean, it surprises me more than anyone that I am still there, because it's actually not in my personality or my nature. What I do think explains it is that I am quite entrepreneurial. I'm not a policy analytical process driven person. So I kind of approach HR from a different angle than I think a lot of HR people do. And I think for me at Coronation, there's always been something new. So, whatever it was,
Exciting, yeah.
I felt like I was continuously learning. COVID threw a whole left curveball to us. We had to completely pivot, my team and I, to suddenly look after our people rather than hiring and doing all the usual HR functions. We then had to really make sure that the people that we couldn't see, because they're all working from home, that we were looking after them and making sure that they were well, despite not being in the office, and trying to retain that connection piece, which was really difficult. When people are not coming to work and realizing why they work for us, you've got to do a lot more to try and connect people. So yes, I think it's been that constant challenge. When people ask me why I've stayed, I always say it's the people. I really am surrounded by a lot of incredibly smart, dedicated people who also know how to have fun. So it's a very balanced lifestyle and environment there. I feel proud to be part of a winning team, but I also enjoy the people that I interact with. So I think those are the two key things.
Awesome. So going back to your point on hiring, I think it's of interest to everyone. Psychometric, obviously, to look for certain traits, but it often you can miss the softer elements of culture when it comes to just purely looking at a psychometric. So how do you kind of test culture through the interview process?
I think that's one of the things my team get quite frustrated with me on, because I will often interview one of their candidates as a second line, and they'll say, "What do you think?" And I'll just say no. And they'll say, "Why?" And I said, "I can't articulate it." But so I guess having been there for 20 years and having hired 80% of the people, there are certain aspects that I can tell. We look for people who have really strong self-belief, and they're kind of very driven and like to manage things almost as though they're running their own business in a role. So I find people who are a little bit nervous and ask questions that can indicate that they don't thrive in that type of environment, I would be cautious about. So often I can tell by the kind of questions they ask me, whether they're a fit in terms of our culture. We don't have grades and levels. So often people who are testing me and asking me, what is the title for this role? What is the next step beyond this role? If they're looking for title and that kind of career trajectory, then our environment might not be the best for them. We will grow them and they will grow their career with us, but it might not be on a title basis. So there are quite a few hints that come up in an interview that can, and often the reason that they're leaving where they are can be a bit of a symptom or insight to me. So people who are part of massive organizations and are frustrated there tend to thrive with us. And I found that for myself, coming from a much bigger organization, where I had all these ideas, and to get them implemented, that had to go through all these hurdles. And then by the time I had approval, it was no longer relevant, whereas now I'm in an environment where I can walk into the CEO's office and say, can we do this? And I'll have to send an email to Exco, but they normally respond really quickly. So you can be nimble and do things when they're needed, rather than having a huge organization that takes time. So people who are frustrated in those type of environments are people that we might look for. So yeah, I think it comes with time and experience. I do think our psychometrist, who's been working with us now for over 10 years, also knows our culture. So, she can tell me based on jobs, we'll set certain criteria per job and per team, and she will say this person might struggle in this culture because they prefer or they work better in this type of environment. So the psychometrics also help us at times to guide whether they're going to be a good fit for our culture.
Okay, awesome. Well, sounds like clearly you're getting it right. Clearly you know what that magic ingredient looks like behind the scenes.
Most of the time, we hope.
Yeah, as long as it's more often than not.
Yeah, I like to think so, yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like a great culture. It's entrepreneurial. There's opportunities for experimentation, for self-starters to really build something of their own, which I think is not easy to find necessarily within the corporate environment. Maybe like shifting focus slightly, we know just the reality, unfortunately, in the investment industry in particular, is it's not an industry which is 50-50 when it comes to male-female split. So what do you think drives that? Why do you think we aren't seeing more women enter the asset management industry?
So I've discussed this with one of our female portfolio managers at length, and I think that what I see at interview level and application level is I don't find as many female candidates who have decided early on that investments is where they want to be. So that's either a social structure or potentially an awareness piece. we have debated whether the imagery around financial markets tends to be the Wolf of Wall Street, cocaine and strippers, and that is actually not what asset management is.
Yes.
It's not what the investment industry is all about. We manage people's pension funds, so it's a very sort of responsible, stable industry. So I think it's a lot of a lack of awareness. And my colleague, Sarah Jane, said, you need to start having conversations with your granddaughters and your daughters about financial markets, because there's a point where, for some reason, women or young women don't see this as an obvious career for them. Less women than men see it as a career for them. So I think it's about raising awareness. I tell all my female colleagues they need to go to their daughters' schools and do those career days and talk about what it's like to work in the investment industry. Because we've got 2 senior portfolio managers who are women and both have 3 kids and have been with us for a long time and are very successful. So, and more in our fixed income team. So it's definitely a possibility. I think that just needs to be shared more. And I think that we need to start that awareness really early in high school, so that women come out and choose degrees. You'll find a lot of female candidates only discover financial markets at university when they do a finance course, for example, or meet somebody at university that tells them about the financial markets, whereas it tends to be that more men, and I'm hoping that's shifting now in time, but more male candidates hear about it earlier. And that potentially is, you've got to have role models who understand or know the investment industry. So in South Africa also, that adds another aspect where a lot of kids grow up without role models. You're talking about stockbrokers and shares that they own. So as an industry, I think we need to bridge that gap and raise awareness about this industry so that people who have a natural ability for it might discover it earlier and then decide, actually, this is something that I would like to do. And I always believe if you see it, you can be it. So, that's why I talk about Sarah Jane, who's one of our portfolio managers, and Pallavi. I always tell them they need to go and do these things, and speak at Women's Day events and go to the schools, because they're a great example of how they're successful women in the investment space. Our economist is also a female. So there are a lot of examples of women who have achieved amazing success within the investment space. And I think if they could share their stories, young women would look to them and go, okay, wow, that sounds like an exciting career. And I can see that you can be successful at it. So we need to do more of that, I think.
More role modeling,
yeah.
more awareness, just to ensure that, more, young, aspiring, individuals, promising students at school are thinking about this as a career opportunity versus choosing careers elsewhere.
I want to tap on this role modeling thing, because I think that there's positive and negative role models. And I've seen it in our industry, unfortunately, where, we have senior women who have taken 2 weeks or 3 weeks of maternity leave. So what that messaging sort of shares with other women in the industry is that in order to succeed in the investment space, you almost have to be able to operate like a man.
Yeah.
And other women looking up to that who may want to have kids, that is the sort of precedent set, that if you want to be successful and senior in this industry, you can't take time off to have kids. Which is why I'm talking about positive role models who have had kids and successful careers, so that women don't feel like they're going to have to choose or not do one or the other well. So role models are very important, but I think it's about the right role model.
Makes sense.
You want women who are authentic as women and potentially mothers, if that's what they choose, who are also successful, and do it in a way that is authentic to them as women, not adopting behaviors like perhaps their male colleagues would have to adopt to be successful. So I think positive role models, I keep saying it, the woman with 3 kids who's successful and are able to ideally do both. I mean, I think it's a constant juggle. I don't think this work-life balance is actually a goal. It's something that's a constant decision or choice that women and men make every day. But I think it's about having the right role models. And I think, unfortunately, when I started out in this industry, there weren't that many women who were being authentically women and bringing a feminine or softer energy, whatever you want to call it. I think the terminology is often problematic, but I think I saw a lot of women who were successful but were quite scary and intimidating and quite masculine in their energy. So I think that it's nice to have women now in the industry, and there are a lot in a number of our businesses. Our competitors, I meet them all the time, who are showing up as women and being successful, which I think is really important for young women to see that they can strive to actually also be like that. And also our industry is doing a lot of great work to transform on a gender basis. CISA, which is our industry body, have introduced the Physica program, which is they hire female investment grads and rotate them in our businesses so that these women get an opportunity to work within the investment space. It's actually targeted to investments rather than operations or other areas. So they, as an industry body, are trying to help us in terms of improving the sort of female demographic within our
So being very
investment space.
deliberate in actually driving that change that you need.
Yeah, it's the second year of the program, and they have 8 to 10 grads every year,
Awesome.
which they actually, the members of a CISA, of which we are one, we then host those students. I mentor students on the program as well, just to try and introduce them to investments as a career on a practical basis, so they get to see what it's like to work in an investment team and can then choose whether that's the career that they'd like to pursue.
Makes sense. I think, I mean, top of funnel, that's definitely, where we need to start, right? And we just need more women entering the industry. But when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that you got these risk events in your career as a female in the workplace. And this applies to, asset management or the investment space, but more broadly. So what are some of those events? And I think it's important that leaders in businesses are aware of them, because I think subconsciously, if you're not aware of them, right, they can lead to, ultimately that individual leaving the business, which is probably not what you want, because there is at risk. And there are actually small things that you can do to maximize success, which I think ultimately people do want to do, but because of ignorance, because of maybe not being conditioned to certain circumstance, you're just not thinking about these things.
So I think for both men and women in the investment space, and probably in most industries, I think that if you support employees at the right time in their career, you actually could probably make the difference in terms of a fork in the road in terms of which their career would grow. And if you do that as an employer, you build an incredible amount of loyalty by doing that. So obvious high-risk times would be when working parents have children. And for us, we started off just doing maternity coaching. We work with a company called Great Expectations, and they do what we now call parental transition coaching. So before somebody goes on parental leave, they have a couple of coaching sessions to prepare them. You have a lot of people who are really nervous about taking that time out of work and what that means for their career, and also how they're going to balance things, and will people forget about them when they're out of the office for 4 months. There's a lot of things that are playing on people's minds that you maybe wouldn't have thought of if you didn't actually offer them that type of support. We also involve the line manager, which is very important, so that they know what some of the concerns are for their employee that's going on parental leave. So that kind of support to help somebody get their head around taking time off and what it's going to be like to come back. A lot of people struggle with that return to work. And if you don't support them in those couple of weeks beforehand and after the return, I think you're at risk of losing a lot of working parents.
Makes sense.
And you can do things like allow a lot more flexibility on the return. So, for a new mother to leave a brand new baby at home is quite a stressful thing to do. So potentially offering them a half day for the first month so that they can start to transition back into the workplace and make sure that their baby is looked after at home. I think COVID did us a favor with a lot of people showing that they can work from home. Pre-COVID, or when everybody was working in the office, parents would have to take family responsibility leave if a child was sick. So, because your computer would be at work and you'd be at home, and you'll wake up and your child is sick and you go, oh, I'm going to have to stay at home today. Whereas now, most people are mobile, right? So you would ideally have your laptop in your bag, you wake up in the morning and your child is sick, you could ideally work from home. And most meetings these days can be done online. So I think for working parents, just little things like that, you get a day where they actually probably want to work. I know when my kids were sick, they're either sleeping or on an iPad. So I'm there in case they need me.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of time in that day where I could be working. So the benefit of being able to work from home helps parents tremendously. And I think it works both ways. I think the biggest risk in all of this is the gender stereotypes. I have a friend who is a journalist and very passionate journalist. It's all she's ever wanted to do, and she's excellent at it. And then her and her husband had 3 kids, and it was kind of assumed that he had to have the corporate job and she had to stay home with the kids. And then they had a conversation because they realized he was miserable and she was miserable. And she said, "I want to go back to work," and he was like, "I don't really want to be at work." And they swapped roles, and now she's happy, he's happy, the kids are taken care of. So I think the biggest risk we make as employers is to make assumptions about what our employees want or can do. So, for example, a role that has travel, a lot of leadership would assume, okay, well, a mother wouldn't want to do that role. Whereas the reality is, it should be up to her to make that decision. She can decide, no, I don't want to travel because I'll be away from my kids too much. You might find somebody who has a partner that can work from home, or a family setup that allows them to travel and they want to take that next step in their career. So I think some of the risk factors are at those moments where people assume somebody wouldn't want an opportunity based on their family setup or their gender. And I think it's really important to make sure that you're offering them the choice to decide as to whether they want to take that next step in their career. And they might decide not if they have small children, if they, whatever their circumstances are. But I think we are always at risk of losing people if we don't offer them opportunities because of assumptions we make. And often those assumptions are well intentioned, right? You think, shame, she wouldn't want to do it because she's got kids. But actually, you might find that, and I see a lot of amazing working moms who are managing to do both really well. So you really should let them decide whether they want to take that risk or step up in their career at that point in time. So those are most of the high risk events. I think the big thing is being passed up for opportunity based on your gender or your family situation. I think a lot of people don't realize that they're doing that because their intentions are positive. And then I think in all parents' life cycles, there are risk events. We're talking earlier about young kids when they're sick all the time, where you do need more time to be able to manage sick children and potentially work from home. So those kind of accommodations can really help retain employees, and at the moment, especially women, although any parent really who needs to work and look after a child.
Yes, I think there are a couple of points there, right? It's, well, like stereotypes, we should, as like forget about them, right? And not have any assumptions around what people do or don't want to do. I think communication's also key, right?
Yeah.
Around, both setting expectation going into paternity leave, both for the person doing that, but also the manager having a discussion with the employee around, okay, well, how are you feeling about it? What do you need from me? How can I support you? How can we set this up for success? And to your point around, job opportunities, etc., we should just communicate and have discussions, right? Like we should never just base our decision on what we assume another person may think, right?
Yeah.
Like you're probably assuming the wrong thing, or you don't know what to assume.
Exactly. You don't know what's going on in someone's head. I love what you said there, because I remember I went through a really difficult time in my career and I had an amazing manager who I'll never forget, Nick Battersby, if you're out there. He was an amazing manager. And his words to me were, "What do you need from me?"
Okay.
And, at a time where I needed support and I didn't really know what I needed, but those words have stuck with me 20 years later, because he said, "What do you need from me?" And I think if you can communicate like that and check in with your employees and offer them what they need at that point in time, you'll retain them, one, and also you will support them in a way that they'll be able to carry on working in a way that's optimal. So it's very important, I think, to have the conversation and ask what somebody needs and what they want. You might find somebody that you assumed was happy doing what they're doing would love to take on a leadership role, and you might not have been aware of that. And you had a great leader sitting under your nose that you didn't realize wanted that next step, right? So that communication, I think, is crucial.
So I think it's about being authentic and like actually connecting as humans, right?
Yeah.
Which I think it's easy to fall into the trap of the transactional deliverables, right? And forget about that human element.
That's very true. Yeah.
I think just on your point on paternity leave, we were chatting as well. I think I was previously at Uber and I shared this with you, but I think it's interesting around the paternity leave policy there, which was, dads and moms got the same amount of time off. And initially I thought, well, that was great for dads. But what I didn't think about, and someone else mentioned this to me, is well, it actually changes your mindset as a manager as well. Because subconsciously, maybe it's not conscious, but if individuals in the workplace are considering hiring, a female or a male for a particular position, you might be thinking, and again, you don't know what's going on in the subconscious, that, well, if I hire this female, maybe she's pregnant and maybe she's going to take off 4 months. But now all of a sudden, whether it's a male or a female, you've got the same risk in inverted commas, right? So all of a sudden, a benefit which is great for men actually levels the playing field, right? Because you don't make that decision based on time off that an individual may take or may not take.
Well, that's a really great example, because there's an unconscious bias that kicks in there. So if you're interviewing a woman of childbearing age, and you will assume that at some point you might want to have children, and that might change your hiring decision, which it shouldn't, right? I mean, I've had friends of mine who said, I've just found out I'm pregnant, I'm going for an interview, what should I do? I say, go for the interview. Why should you not? It's a biology that is, it's not your choice to have that biology, but it shouldn't prejudice you in terms of opportunity. And the right employers will see that. There might well be jobs that need somebody in the job right now for a set period of time. You'll maybe have some projects where you could justify continuity, for example. But I like the idea of parents having equality in that. My cousin who lives in the UK, him and his wife had a baby. She was at a law firm and knew she was going to be up for partner. Also didn't like the idea of being at home for 4 months. And so he said, I'll stay at home for 4 months. And she went back after 6 weeks, was promoted to partner in a law firm. And he stayed at home because his job, he also got the paternity leave, and they made that decision together as a family. So I think that equality will shift things. If we can do that globally, not all countries are as accommodating when it comes to things like parental leave, but it does change that unconscious bias that will eventually not be there at play if both men and women take parental leave, and equal amounts of it, obviously.
Yeah, and I think it's super important. I think also for people just to be aware of it, right? Like, even if you don't have that policy, but is it maybe playing into your decision making? And is it influencing?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, like, and if you just kind of force yourself to ask yourself those tough questions, maybe it will change some of your decision making, right? If you try and take that bias out of the equation.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. I think anything that gives you potential to discriminate should ideally be removed, and I think so often a lot of that is unconscious, which is why I mentioned the example of, we realize that a lot of young Black talent that we want to hire don't have role models because of our history who would understand financial markets and investments or sit and talk around the dinner table about it. Some of them are the first to study in their families, for example. So we need to counteract that and make sure that we're not insisting on it as a requirement for a role. You have to have been passionate for financial markets since you were 12. That's not possible for everybody. So you need to make sure that you remove those biases that could kick in your hiring process, and look for people who have a curiosity, who have all the right criteria, and then when you tell them about the industry, seem to be excited and curious about it. But I think in every step of the way, you have to be checking that none of the requirements you have are going to be biasing towards a group or away from another group in any way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's just important to be deliberate in the way you do that. And it goes back to, I guess, where we started around, well, hiring for specific traits in individuals, right? So, do you have self-starters? Do you have people who've got high agency? Do you have people who are self-disciplined and are self-motivated and can bring all those things to the workplace? And the rest can be taught, right? If that mindset is correct, then hopefully, the skills or the passion for the industry, you can expose people to that and they can develop that over time. But I think that mindset is a harder thing to get right or to find.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love that word, all those words that you said in the beginning, agency, that's what we're looking for. So it's actually is why we do the psychometric testing, because we can test potential, So I mean, with testing numerical ability, it doesn't matter what your education was or what your marks were like, because some kids are doing a lot more to be able to get those marks. They're having to, their schools are not as good, they have to walk or whatever to school and home. So to test numerical ability without looking at transcripts is a lot fairer in terms of looking for that right personality profile as well as those traits that we look for. The rest we can teach, and we've got a lot of really willing mentors who are, I mean, I have so many amazing people in our investment team that if I ever meet a candidate that I think has potential, and I say, would you mind having a coffee with her and telling her what the industry's like? I've got at least 3 people who put up their hand, in our investment team. So it's not that there's a lack of willingness to hire. They really are willing to share the story. So the more that we can do that, if we come across young talent and just tell them this is what this industry is about, this is what you would do every day, we can hopefully get more people that buy into the idea and want to grow their careers within the investment space.
That's awesome. I think maybe just in closing, I think you've touched on it, Chan. It's more in the beginning or getting people into the door, the context that you raised it in, but the importance of mentorship in the workplace in terms of giving people access to a person who's further along in the career that's, has some battle scars, and can provide guidance. Is that something that you do as an organization? Is that something that sets up younger, promising individuals within the workplace up for success?
We do it on a formal basis and also on an informal basis. So you'll often find within teams that someone will act as a mentor within a team. And then we do have mentors that have signed up and are trained and are willing to mentor new people in the business. And that is to help them navigate our environment, those often unspoken rules that you don't know, and to help them navigate challenges from someone who's been there for a long time and understands what it's like to start out and navigate difficulties or career shifts, etc. So we do offer that to all new staff. We have the mentors. We also do offer coaching at appropriate times in people's careers that might help them with those challenges as well. And we try to stick with coaches who know our environment so that they understand what it's like to work at our business. So, in that they're getting a mentor, an external person, but who understands our business well enough to be able to coach them effectively. So we do offer a lot of that. We know it's important to help people land effectively at our business. So we do Ignite group coaching. When people start, we put them into groups with a coach so that they can be the new kids on the block together and learn how to integrate into our environments. So we do quite a bit to try and help people land and navigate and be new in our business and hopefully set them up for success.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think just taking learning there, I think mentorship is just such an easy thing for, obviously external coaches have a cost, but just getting, people who've been around in the business to informally mentor, be there. So, this is your buddy. This is someone you can lean on when you've got that question and maybe you're not comfortable, you don't know how to approach it with your manager. It's such an important thing to do. And it just drives that culture of communication and kind of a team mindset more broadly across the organization.
Definitely, very important.
But thanks so much. I think it was a great discussion. Just wrapping up briefly, we've spoken about a lot. Firstly, some of the traits in that coronation in particular, but I think this extends across every organization. Look for in top performers things like the right mindset, self-starters, people who have resilience, that can navigate ambiguity, are really important traits which you can't necessarily teach. I think you can develop, but in this case you test for, you try and get a sense for as part of the interview process. The importance of, I think, just creating more awareness for people in university, in high school, who are looking for careers, that asset management, investment, that these demanding jobs in inverted commas are open to anyone, no matter what gender you are. What we can do within organizations to remove some bias to ensure that anyone can succeed and has support to succeed within the organization. And I think in closing, maybe the power of mentorship. So thanks so much. I think it was a great discussion.
Thank you.
I'm sure our listeners and viewers learned a lot. I know I did.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.